Welcome everyone to the latest in a series of development and support webinars delivered by the NIHR Academy. My name is Sarah Howarth and I work in the NIHR Academy as the Assistant Development and Support Manager. This webinar, Leading Innovation and Change, is delivered in collaboration between the NIHR Academy and Oak Ridge, one of our Leadership Development Programme partners. The webinar will be facilitated by Mark and Jo, both senior consultants at Oak Ridge who have extensive experience in behavioural and cultural change and are passionate about helping people and teams to achieve their full potential. Jo, I'm going to now hand over to you.
I'm going to think about the importance of making sure we invest time in driving innovation and recognise the importance of engaging and supporting others to lead change successfully. We're going to learn some approaches to building a learning culture that helps us ensure improvement and innovation. And I think, it's safe to say over the last 2 years almost, we've all become really, experts in change to some extent, being very adaptable, being very able to pivot and change because we've been forced to. And really, what can we learn from some of that experience? What can we take into our next, ways of working and leading change? And we are going to be launching a full module on this topic. So there'll be lots more additional information on that module that will be launched on the Academy section of NIHR Learn. So please keep an eye out for that. That will be coming soon. But let's make a start on today. So why is leading change and innovation so important? Well, we know the basis of great health and social care research is all about change, all about innovation, new discoveries, which transform the health of everyone. And of course, we really need to have that foundation of transformation to achieve the NIHR mission to improve the health and wealth of the nation through research. And so that enables resource in health and social care to make a difference to all of us. And so whilst the basis of great research is transformation, and that's what many of you are doing or you're supporting others to do on a daily basis, what we're thinking about here is taking some of those principles to help us lead change in the ways that we work for ourselves and our teams. And often we can find that challenging. And of course, the challenges of a virtual world are making that even more difficult when we know that when we bring together, we get the best creative and innovative thinking, and that creativity happens. And it's more difficult to build that within a virtual world. So let's think about how we lead change and innovation effectively. We've kind of looked at some of the work and research and pulled out a number of key behaviours that we think are important. And so being strategically aware, understanding what is going on in, what levers for change are happening in the environment, in the external world, as well as what's happening internally too. Developing and communicating a clear vision of what that might look like. And really using our ability that we've, as I say, all developed even more so over the last few years of adapting to new and changing circumstances. We want to be thinking about how we work through complexity and ambiguity and how we get more comfortable with that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, and navigate that constantly changing environment. So thinking about some of these leadership capabilities that we've identified, really like to hear from you. Add in the chat, what do you think you need to be able to lead change effectively? What helps you when you're being asked to change? Any other capabilities, principles that you think we need to ensure we have in our toolkit? So just mark while we're waiting to hear from any comments in the chat, anything that you'd want to add into from your experience as a chemist working on lots of experiments.
You build a nice picture there, all chemists run experiments at benches. Yeah. I think that the reflection for me is, so my background's in life sciences within pharmaceutical industry, and within that industry, priorities are always changing, budgets are always changing, the external environment's always changing. So as a team member on a project, is that we may have the best plan in the world and we kind of know what we're going to be doing for the next 12 months, but it only takes a slight variable change in the external internal environment, and suddenly budgets are reduced, or timelines are extended, or resources are kind of pulled from projects. So that kind of dynamic environment means that you are managing change on a daily basis then.
Yeah. And we've had one comment in the chat so far. So teamwork, absolutely. We can't manage change on our own. We need to really build that team to help us work together and support each other through change as well. So great to keep any thoughts coming. It'd be great to hear from you. So we've said it's difficult thinking about how we get people more comfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity, and how we can help people to embrace change with confidence. And so we're going to touch first on reactions to change, and why is it that we react to change as we do. And so what we've got here, a very simplified image of the brain for you, but what we know when we look at how we react to change is that humans are programmed to seek out stability, certainty, simplicity, and clarity. And when we're faced with something new or different or uncertain, we can feel uncomfortable. We're programmed to look at that difference, newness, or uncertainty as a potential threat. And it's all related to our primitive brain and the function in our brain that's kept us safe and allowed us to evolve as a species. Of course, the reaction that we know is that fight, flight, freeze response. It's an important function. It prompts us to act quickly, as I mentioned, when something unknown or different, could be that threat to our safety, kicks in, causes reactive behaviour. And this behaviour is often when we see people perhaps behaving unexpectedly to a piece of news around some change, or we've kind of shared a change that's going to be happening. When we see this reactive behaviour, it's coming back to that fight, flight, freeze response. And of course, where we need to be thinking and responding, and certainly thinking about, if we want to be innovative and creative, is we need to be thinking in a much more considered and responsive way rather than that reactive way. So it's a useful function. It still helps us today. If a bus is coming towards us, we need to be prompted to jump out of the way quickly to avoid danger. Imagine, as Mark said, changing priorities all the time, your research programs being halted or reprioritized due to funds or new priorities. That might well have created a threat brain reaction, even though it's not putting your life in danger. You may still be instinctively responding to that first news about that because it's seen as something new, different, or changed. And there's a number of reasons why we can sense danger at work. And it's useful for us to think about those reasons to help us then perhaps overcome them, to try and downplay those triggers to threat. And Dr. David Rock did some research around this and built a model. And he introduced us to the SCARF model. He identified these 5 types of threat at work that particularly happen at work that can move people into this threat brain reaction. And it involves these 5 domains, as you can see in the center of the model. So status, so whether the change is going to have an impact on our own individual relative importance to others, whether that's a role, a responsibility, a place in the structure, etc. Certainty, and this of course is that lack of being able to predict the future, not being able to work out what the uncertainty means for us, and it's challenging in that face of change. We don't have all the answers, so we go into that mode where we're looking for detailed answers that may not be there. Autonomy, this is that ability to provide a sense of control over events. We have some choice in the change. And of course, sometimes change feels like it's forced upon us and we have no control. And that can create an even bigger reactive threat. Relatedness, our sense of safety with others. It's about trust, a sense of belonging. So again, if we're thinking about change where we're moving into new teams or working with new partners, that could trigger a threat brain reaction. And then fairness, the final domain. And this is this perception of whether the change is fair, whether it's fair for me or others from that perspective. And so during these change, different triggers can be triggered, but you can imagine all of these triggers could also be triggered all at the same time, which has even more of a reactive impact. And when we're in this primitive brain reactive thinking, we're being very inhibited in terms of innovation, creativity, adaptation, and of course, the blood is kind of down in the base of our brain, dealing with the fight, flight, freeze, whereas we really need it to be here in the front of our human part of our brain, where we can be using it for the creativity, the innovation. And of course, each time we get a threat brain reaction, we flood our bodies with stress hormone, cortisol. So again, it's having an impact on health and well-being and our sense of belonging and our sense of feeling able to contribute openly and fully in creative processes. Also, this doesn't have to be a huge change, it can be a really small change. And of course, you know, constantly changing world, the experience we've been all through in the last 2 years, I'm sure we can all feel and recognise these elements of where we've been in threat brain reaction around new and different information. And of course, when we're working virtually, we can't always get that sense of non-verbal communication in the room. So what we might be hearing from somebody is very different to how they're feeling, and it's more difficult to pick up how people are really feeling about the change. And so just interested to hear about your experience and think about a time when maybe you've reacted badly to change. So Mark, you've got a poll to introduce for the participants to take part in.
I certainly have. So opening the poll now. So think of a time when you reacted badly to a change being imposed on you. What was the cause of that reaction? Can you just choose just one from the screen?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about that root cause, and maybe it's a number of those, but maybe what was the main root cause? Mark, anything that you've experienced while we're waiting for the results to come through? Anything that you can call upon?
Quite a few.
We've got lots.
I think the main root cause when I felt threatened has been around relatedness, because relationships are really important to me. And if there's something happened, if there a trigger, then if it's got an impact on relatedness and kind of relationships, then that can cause me to trigger in the wrong way.
Yeah, absolutely. Have we got the results? How we're doing?
We're all in, I think. Yeah. So 35. Just give you a couple more. So 85%. Close in 3, 2, 1. All right, and share the results. So we have so a sense of fairness that is coming through strongly, 50% of the audience. Then the next one is certainty, around 22%. And then third, autonomy, impacts on autonomy, then relatedness, and then status. So fairness is definitely the majority of the feedback.
Yeah, and I think that certainly represents some of the experience we've all been feeling the last week or so, doesn't it? So recognizing the comment you made just before about that, you know, threat to relatedness, anything that could have helped you feel more safe about the change. And again, for those of you on the webinar, if you can think about what could have helped in this situation, what might have helped, feel free to add your comments to the chat. But again, Mark, anything that would have helped you in that scenario?
Understanding the reason for the change. So quite a lot of the time, my kind of reaction is because I've made up a story about what it all means and what the impact might be. So having clarity about that can actually allay some of those fears. So understanding that it's not going to have the negative impact that I think it will really helps.
Yeah, and so again, thinking about, you know, what the cause of that potential threat is for yourself, but also if you're going to be talking about change with your teams, what potentially is going to trigger their threat? what might I do to be able to, resolve some of that trigger, to dampen it down a bit and talk more in a safe brain way of thinking. So if it is certainty that's the challenge, I recognise we haven't got all the answers, but we will be looking at co-creating what that looks like for all of us together can be a useful message to share. Thinking about fairness, depending very much on the situation, of course, but thinking often it might be around the greater good of the change. It might be around looking at the bigger picture rather than the individual impacts on each of us. So really thinking about identifying that threat and how can I use my communication style to try and address some of that threat, to get people into the safe brain thinking so that then they can feel more confident about the change and more able to be innovative. So I'm going to pass over to Mark now, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about what we can do to promote that safe brain thinking to develop innovation and creativity. Thanks, Mark.
That's great. Thanks, Jo. So the title of the webinar today is about change and driving innovation. So just conscious of the fact that when changes happen, that has an impact on driving innovation. So there was Forbes identified, they did some research and identified 6 critical leadership skills that really help maintain a culture of innovation. So hopefully these things also identify ways of allaying those fears, understanding how people react to change and to perceived threats. So the first thing is to kind of enable possibility thinking. A tendency that if something happens is people start to shut down, they start to think of things they can't do. So how do you challenge assumptions and think what if, instead of, oh, we can't do this and we can't do that, and we kind of go into our shells. And this is about reframing that humans, we have a natural negativity bias, looking at the worst things. Hence a threat reaction is, there's a change and we don't tend to look at it positively by nature. The assumptions really slow us down and limit our thinking. And by kind of changing that narrative to what would be an entirely different way of handling a situation like this, there's got to be a better way. What will we need to overcome that barrier, instead of kind of, we can't do that. So really embracing a leadership skill to embrace that possibility thinking is really important. So challenging those assumptions, empathizing with the end user, whether that's an internal or an external customer. It could be a research participant, it could be patient, it could be a member of the public. So trying to walk in their shoes and seek to understand where their pain points might be, and understanding from potential how, if you were in their shoes, what might be the potential threats to what's being communicated or engaged or to that particular change. And that really helps with that messaging. So from my example beforehand was, understanding why the change was happening and what potential impacts might be, really help avoid me having to kind of make it up myself. Listening deeply to what they want to accomplish, what they want to achieve, and the problems that they face. Difficult to empathize if you can't put yourself into their shoes, and for the other person to see things as being disingenuous. So really asking those questions of, where they are, where they're trying to get to, and then be able to communicate and really empathizing with them. Thinking ahead of the curve. So as a leader, looking at what those emerging trends might be, scanning the horizon for forces of change. So the role of the leader is to be on the front foot of anticipating where a change may be coming, so that you can create the messaging and engage with the impacted people up front, so it's not a surprise. This concept of continually building your ideas factory, so enhancing creativity at home and at work, writing things down when you've got an idea, then that really helps to create this innovation culture. Complimenting people for coming up with ideas, even though you may not be able to act on them straight away, it kind of goes into the idea factory, goes into the idea bank, in order to bring those ideas out later on. And then these could be ideas for doing things better, doing things in a different way, which can help when change happens. You've actually got some ideas of things you can actually do proactively there. And building buy-in. So it's all about what's in it for other people. So linking with number 3 on this particular slide about empathizing with the end user, build buy-in by building in what's in it for them as well, so creating that that value proposition as to why the change is happening and what the benefit of the change may be and what's required from everybody. So this really helps in overcoming those obstacles and objections, gaining commitment and focus, asking for feedback. And again, it's always thinking about the other people's motivations. The aim is to take people with you on this change, taking people with you and helping drive that innovation. So we've got another poll now. So looking at the 6 areas we have on the slide there, Jo, are you okay to open poll number 2 and introduce us to it?
Yeah, so which of those 6 do you do the most? Is it embrace possibility thinking, challenge assumptions, empathize with the end user, think ahead of the curve, continuously build your ideas factory, or building that buy-in? So think about what you do most, what comes most naturally or comfortably to you. So we're getting lots of participation now. We're about 60%, so keep it coming.
Perfect. Jo, we put you on the spot there.
Yeah.
Which of these do you think you do the most?
Do you know, I think one of the things I've had to really work on is embrace possibility thinking. So I try now to put a little bit of a scan on everything that I first hear about, and I try and remember what if, as opposed to, oh no, here we go again. Mm-hmm. So really trying to create some habits to change those thinking patterns.
Great stuff, thank you. How are we doing on the poll?
Yeah, we've got 85, so just a few more seconds. 85%, 87%. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So we can see here, top of the poll, empathize with the end user. Absolutely, compassion and empathy is so important, isn't it? Then we're looking at embracing possibility thinking. Again, we do have to overcome our natural thinking styles, so that's something that we can really work on well. 25%, continuously build your idea factory. So that's brilliant. I can imagine that's exciting place to be. Looking at building buy-in at 17%, thinking ahead of the curve at 14%, and finally challenging assumptions at 6%. So maybe that's one to be explored.
Great stuff, thank you. And in an exploration kind of mode, do you want to run poll 3, which is the question is probably going to fill the gaps that we've just seen there. Yeah. So which do you feel you do the least, or you maybe need to do more of? So again, multiple selection, if you can have a go at that, please.
Yeah, that's launched now.
It is interesting that the challenging assumptions was the lowest one. We kind of just get on with it without kind of challenging those assumptions and things we think and the stories we've made up. It's almost like the last thing we think, actually, did we challenge why we're doing this, or what the possibilities might be? Yeah,
doing a lot of work with clients about thinking outside the box, which sounds like one of those kind of business sayings, but actually, again, it is those filters and biases that we put on events and experiences, and being aware of the filters and biases can be really, really useful to help us challenge those assumptions. So we've got 80% participation, so I'll leave it for a few seconds more.
Mm-hmm. I think, and again, that kind of thinking ahead of the curve it's sometimes that can be over and above what you kind of have to in the day job, and it's a nice to have to be able to scan the horizon. But being able to do it is hugely valuable to take the team with you and create and innovate and create that culture of having the ideas ready for the change to come, because you've actually scanned the horizon as well.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now.
Mm-hmm.
And the results. So we have, again, so the things that we have to do more of, we do the least. Challenge assumptions, 38%. Continuously build your ideas factory, 29%. So creating some time is often a challenge there. Thinking time, isn't it, to get those ideas forthcoming. Embrace possibility thinking, 21%. Think ahead of the curve, as you said, Mark, just then 18%. And building buy-in, also 18%. And then we're looking at empathise with the end user, not surprisingly the lowest here, at 6%. So yeah, some great outcomes there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll stop sharing that. And so in order to kind of create this culture that you're kind of change ready and you're ready to kind of do that, is that some work was done by the Centre for Creative Leadership, and that looked at, it was looking at business thinking versus innovation thinking, and the change that's required in order to create an innovative thinking culture. So with this in mind, with this slide in mind, and we have the chat, so love to hear your comments in the chat. What do you feel you do well, or could be kind of stopping you creating that innovation culture and thinking innovatively? So the Centre for Creative Leadership created their view of the difference between business thinking and innovation thinking. And we need to think about the kind of culture that's going to foster that innovation thinking. So what kind of stops creativity and you know and that kind of thing. Some of the key takeaways from the work that was done was it was about organizations getting comfortable with ambiguity, and that's a difference between business thinking and innovation thinking. So that feeling and acceptance, actually it's okay that we don't know everything quite often. And myself as a scientist, as I kind of reflected, you always want more data before you make a decision. And actually you may need to make a decision when you haven't got all the answers, but you just need to do something with the view that as things change, you'll adapt and change as you go along. So you don't need to know everything and being comfortable with that. It's okay for some things not to be known at the moment, but that enables you to make decisions and actually make progress in the absence of all the stuff. Accepting that the best predictions are based on the facts than waiting for the perfect one. So making the decision based on what you know, and that being the best decision at the moment. Seeing the bigger picture, so a bit of that scanning the horizon, understanding how everything kind of fits together and why what you're doing is important. That really helps create purpose. Opening up possibilities by asking those what if questions. So it's not a case of, oh, we can't do that because of this, but okay, what if? What barrier would we need to remove in order to be able to do this? What would be needed in order for us to be able to achieve what we're trying to achieve? And getting input from multiple sources instead of thinking that you've got to come up with the ideas and be creative, you know, as a silo on your own in a box in a cupboard. Actually getting input from lots of multiple sources, engaging the wider groups, means that you can make much better decisions, and it's not all on you as well. You don't have the pressure of doing that. And also recognizing there's always a better way to do something, so that what you have is the best that you have at the moment, but actually, you know, there's always a better way. We can always get better as we get more information, as we start to do things more effectively, as we engage people better. Any comments coming through in the chat, Joe?
Yeah, there's some really interesting ones actually, and it'll be interesting to see if anyone else resonates with this. So the first comment is about applying for fellowships and the person feels that if they wrote more about innovative thinking within that application, they could be penalised. So that's interesting because, of course, then that the same person goes on to say, actually, working in a field where research is pretty new, innovative thinking really fits with that work. So it's kind of the practice and the doing isn't necessarily matching with what the person feels comfortable drawing out in their application. So I wonder why that is. That'd be an interesting one to hear other people's thoughts on, and whether there's a way that we can make sure that we can feel comfortable about talking about innovative thinking, because I guess that ultimately is kind of what research is to some extent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it'd be great to hear anybody else's thoughts and views on that. That'd be lovely. Thank you for making that comment.
Great, thank you very much. Okay. So some thoughts and ideas about enabling that creativity, that innovative thinking. Already covered this at length, but it's always asking those what if questions. What would I need to change to make it possible? And that's especially when your mind goes to that threat brain reaction of, something's happening, close down, can't possibly do it, and come up with all the reasons for not doing something, or it won't work because we tried it in the past, it never worked then, therefore it's never going to work in the future. So really challenging those assumptions and asking, well, actually, what if it did work? What would we need to make sure it is successful? Being curious links back to the idea about the empathy. Empathizing with people means you've got to ask them lots of questions. You've got to be interested in what they're doing, interested in their ideas, how they're feeling. So that curiosity, even if it's even the obvious questions. And I do a lot of work with boards where I'm not the technical expert on that particular activity, but I can ask, I call them intelligently naive questions. So they're not stupid questions, they're intelligently naive. And quite often that really opens up the debate. Quite often, lots of other people are thinking exactly the same thing, but maybe don't have the courage to ask the questions. So, be curious about things, why things work, why things don't work. Creativity is about changing your environment as well. So kind of from a physical perspective, how many times do you get out of the office or get out the home office, get out the house and just go for a walk and just think things through and help your mind kind of work on things without you being in front of a computer screen. How many times do you have walking meetings? So getting together with somebody and chatting it through as you're walking. How many times do you take your creativity sessions to a non kind of traditional work environment? So actually a change of environment can really start the creative juices going. Purposefully throwing in different ideas to stimulate the debate. If anyone's familiar with kind of De Bono's 6 hats approach to creative problem solving and innovation and creating new ideas, is actually having somebody to actually throw in those, which if you sit back and reflect it, that was completely off the wall. But actually by being disruptive and putting in those ideas to stimulate the debate can actually create really great ideas. Bringing in non-experts. So, there is a tendency is that within our groups and our projects, it's always the experts are there. Actually having some non-experts, having some lay people, and it's really important with getting the public, members of the public involved in research. It is a really important element of just bringing in a non-technical person to actually offer their different perspectives, and that can kind of disrupt and create innovation. And the final thing is kind of a tip of make sure have fun doing it as well. It doesn't have to always be so serious. So be playful, include your humor where appropriate. And there was, if anyone's come across Amy Brann, and we've got some of the links to the various resources that we've got here. So Amy Brann was the author of Make Your Brain Work. And she said that science shows us that our level of creativity and our moods are linked. We know that being positive is good for us, it's good for our health, social relationships, and good for creativity. And happiness is the best emotion for creative thinking. So being relaxed or serene isn't so good, but neither is being sad or anxious. So it's important that we need to have the creative processes. We've got to enjoy it as well. So you can find a module on the Learn Academy section on creative problem solving. And that also includes a suite of tools to promote the creative thinking. So let's have the next poll. If you could introduce that, please, Jo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll launch the poll, which is, what could you do more of and build into your daily work from today with regard to building creativity into your work? And I think we've had a comment through, which I think is a really important one that really links well to this topic. It's talking about innovation thinking being restricted in a system. So, for example, the NHS, the system, the hierarchy that we're working with can often create blockages to creativity and innovation. And so how do we create pockets of innovation and creativity, and how do they then marry with the hierarchy of the structure of the organisation? Often a real challenge for large organisations. And so recognising to some extent what is within your control and influence here can be really helpful. So can you create this environment of learning and creativity within your sphere of control and influence. Can that be helpful for you? So we've got 71% participating in the poll. I'll just leave it open for a little bit longer. And again, somebody else is also commenting around this hierarchy, not taking well to disruptive ideas. And I guess it's thinking about, as I said, what's within your control and influence here? What could you do within your remit to build some creativity into what you're doing? And so we've got 83% now. I'll leave it open for a couple of seconds longer.
Great stuff.
And then we'll share the poll. Okay, let's see what's coming up. And poll and share results. So yes, asking what if is a really small habit that if we can practice can be really, really helpful. We've got that at 46%. And then we're looking at changing the environment, 29%. I think, again, lots of research. Actually, if we can get to green spaces, that really promotes creativity. So whilst we're thinking about walking meetings and maybe trying to get out at lunchtime, if there's a green space nearby, even better. Let's have a look at the next one. So we've got equal pegging, be disruptive and be playful. Mm-hmm. And I guess some of the playfulness is taking us back to our childhood when we were, before we started to put too many filters and assumptions on our thinking, when we were very, very open-minded. So thinking about play, how can we bring more play into our work, which sounds perhaps at odds, but actually it does help. And so we see lots of activity around different ways of thinking, do things differently. I think Mark mentioned 6 thinking hats as a tool. It can be really fun, but also, you know, give great dividends as well. And then the final one, be curious. So that's come out at 20%. So there are results. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you very much. Okay. So just to kind of expand out a little bit on diversity of thinking and how to create diverse thinking. So one of the best ways of driving innovation and creativity is to ensure that we build diversity into our thinking. And if anyone's read Matthew Syed, any of his work, and one particular book he wrote called Rebel Ideas, The Power of Diverse Thinking, is very good. And again, there's a link to reference to that in the slide pack when you get that through if you want it. And that is really describing how individual intelligence and creativity, so that kind of siloed having to think of everything yourself, that's no longer enough for us to be able to tackle today's kind of complex problems and challenges. We need others, we need diverse thinking, because challenges today are more complex. And he suggests that the only way to effectively tackle complex problems is to harness the power of what he terms cognitive diversity. And that is really reflecting the different ways people process knowledge, problem solve, understand complexity, and learn. So increasing cognitive diversity can lead to less groupthink, which leads to better decision making and can enable teams to better respond to their stakeholders, kind of creates that agility, that change agility. You know, thousands, hundreds, even going back a couple of 100 years, cognitive diversity was less important in the past because our problems tended to be a lot simpler. It was kind of food, shelter, the more base needs. If you go back a couple of 100 years. The critical point is that solutions to complex problems tend to rely on multiple layers of insight and therefore require multiple points of view. And the more diverse your perspectives, the more extensive the range of potential solutions. So things like different perspectives and judgments being expressed, there's no point in having useful information if it's not shared. Collective intelligence hinges upon the expression of diverse ideas, yet it's a risk when the leadership or a leader shuts it down and it's perceived to be a threat. So remember the David Rock threat brain, that if somebody comes up with an idea and the leader perceives that to be a threat to them, it's very easy to shut that conversation down. And if that's shut down, kind of, you know, how willing are other people to to kind of share their ideas if they've kind of just seen that happen. So when you're on a video conference, so imagine in our virtual worlds now as a reality of a way of working, how open and how willing do you feel willing to contribute? Do you find that the quieter members of the team actually might go 2-3 hours and not say a single thing on a video conference call or a virtual meeting? Or does somebody dominate that discussion, which kind of excludes other people from contributing to that? And so it's really important that this diversity of thinking really enables possible and impossible to be tested, takes into account different thinking styles of team members, and really gathers the wisdom from the entire group. So just finishing off with some tips for innovating in a virtual world, so pulling through some of those challenges that we may have. The first one is to think of work as an activity, not a place. This is really important as we could consider virtual working in hybrid teams. So consider which environment would help achieve the best outcome for what has to happen. Do you need to bring everybody together in one place? Rules and regulations and the COVID rules, making sure you're within those. But actually, if you want to run a creative session, is doing it on a VC on a virtual platform, is that the best way of doing it? Or do you bring everyone together in one location? If you're just doing updates, progress checking, then doing that virtual, that kind of works okay. If you need to be creative in a hybrid setting, then consider the tools and format of the flow of the session itself. So what does that session look like? Are you having breaks in there? Have you got energizers? What kind of tools and apps do you actually use to make sure you're getting the creativeness out of that session that you can do? Think about people that interpret and absorb information in different ways. So the visual, audio, getting their hands on things, then that will ensure, if you design those sessions most appropriately, that you're going to achieve what you need to get out of that in terms of creating innovation in the virtual world. Be aware of your proximity biases. So a tendency is that you take more attention on the people closer to you. So this can really disengage those people who are working remotely. So actively engaging team members, promoting things like buddying up, and both online and offline working. So buddying up, but also having people do things outside the meeting, so offline channels, to ensure that the knowledge is actually shared and wisdom is shared about the group. Being intentional, so this means ensuring the purpose of different meetings, workshops, interactions are crystal clear. People understand what it is. So from before, when we saw the reaction to a change, is it quite often that, for me personally, that's because I'm not entirely sure what's expected of me or what this is all about. And making it really clear means I can come really well prepared to contribute in the best way I can. Using appropriate collaboration tools, there are loads of them now, so don't be afraid of trying a new tool. If you're working within your project team, everybody knows you. That if you try something and it doesn't quite work, just don't use it again. Use a different tool. So there are lots of different tools that we can have, and it's okay, reaching out to other people and find out what they use and how they find it, and don't just be stuck with what you already know. So really challenge. What do I need to do to get the best out of this group in this particular setting, and which tool is going to help us actually do that? So things like, there's some really good virtual whiteboard software now, which is absolutely fantastic. Different project management tools to enable everyone to collaborate, and there's one version of the truth and tracking progress. So being able to do the things through that virtually can save time and effort, and really helps keep people engaged. And don't forget about celebrating the successes along the way, especially the small. Don't wait for the project's delivered, yay, everything's fantastic. The small wins, the achievement of those little milestones, the fact that you had a really great creative session and loads of ideas came out. So celebrating those little wins is really important. You're using things like newsletters to keep people engaged with what's kind of going on, with that wider horizon that we're kind of scanning. Having virtual gatherings. So, you know, I know organizations where they have a 30-minute coffee catch up first thing in the morning, and they don't talk about work at all. So this is a 30 minutes energizer for the team at the beginning of every day, just to kind of see how people are, and then everyone's kind of set for the day. You know, we've gone through that period of the last 2 years of having virtual quizzes. It works for some people, it doesn't work for other people. But thinking, you know, innovation and creativity is about how do we keep people engaged, and how do we celebrate their successes and the good news as we're going along. So in summary, I hope we've recognised, I hope we've shared the recognition, the importance of investing time to drive innovation in order to deliver fantastic research. In terms of being able to do that, it's recognising the importance of engaging and supporting others to lead that change and lead change successfully. And there's some tips and techniques there of how to kind of drive and build that culture of innovation and creativity, and help others to manage change, because you may be fine with change, but other people may be struggling with that. So that there's some ways of tips and techniques to do that. And finally, there is so when you get the slide pack afterwards, there are some references and further reading. And with that, I shall hand over to Sarah and see what do we have in the Q&A.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you very much, Mark and Jo, for a really interesting session. So we're now going to open up the Q&A. There is still time for you to send in your questions by clicking on the Q&A button. You can send questions to us anonymously, and you can upvote on ones that you particularly want to see answered by clicking on the thumbs up icon. So I'm going to go over to the Q&A now. So we do have a few questions in here already, so I'm going to read these out for you, Mark and Jo. The first question is, how can you get people who are usually quiet to contribute ideas?
I'll take, yeah, and this links, Tara's put a comment in there, I found virtual meetings made me less confident to voice my ideas. So the role of the leader of that is to actively engage with people and to invite them into the meeting. So if they're not contributing, to be able to, in a constructive way and in a empathetic way, asking if that person has any ideas. What you can also do is, if you're conscious of that, you can share your ideas in advance. So have send it through to the leader, the kind of chair or whoever's running the call, and say, I've got some ideas. Here they are. Could you kind of pull me into the call as appropriate? Because that's kind of the role of the lead. And another thing I find really useful, because I personally find it really difficult when you've got kind of, because video conferencing is unidirectional. When one person's talking, no one else can. But we've got a chat function. So quite often when I come up with something, because I've kind of reflected, and 5 minutes later I've actually come up with my fantastic idea. And when I've got that, is I put it into the chat. So then it's recorded and other people can comment on it. And then it's up for the person who is leading the meeting to be checking the chat feed as well, and to go, actually, there's a really good comment from Mark on that particular piece. So I find that works really well with me, is actually use the chat.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, we were doing some work on behavioural nudges, and this was one that was shared on this session. It was a really good idea. Often the quieter people, maybe to some extent it is a lack of confidence, but maybe it is that more introverted thinking, they're not quite ready to share. And so what they suggested was, instead of having your big discussion debate about what you're going to do and then making your decision, you have your big discussion and debate, you invite as many people in as possible, you then put a break in, just a quick coffee break, and then bring everybody back and just say, right, any more final thoughts or ideas to throw into the mix before we make our final decision. And it just gives a little bit of time and space for the people who have a more introverted style to just reflect. And it's just a tiny change, because normally we have the break at the end of the decision-making session, don't we? But it's such a tiny change, but could be quite powerful in terms of really getting some of those gems out of people's thinking. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. The next question that we've got is, how can you run creative sessions online?
Well, this has been a real challenge for all of us in this space. So we've explored so many different tools and techniques. There's, as Mark mentioned before, there's brilliant interactive whiteboards, and there's ones that have like post-its that you can add on. You can add images in, so you can make it really creative in terms of it's not just capturing notes on a board. You can add images and colours and different fonts and etc. There's tools that give you an opportunity to do a card sort, for example. So maybe you're doing something around, I don't know, strengths, or you're thinking about values that you want to bring to a project and mission. You could do a card sort on it to help you. So there's different systems that enable you to build online creativity into your session. So it's not just a Teams call where you're all kind of talking around an agenda document and making notes on a Word document. There's so much creativity out there. Anything that you've got into add, Mark? Because I know you're pretty techie.
Techie. I'm as techie as I need to be. One thing to consider is that if you're, traditionally everyone's kind of in a room and they're doing stuff, and you're actually constrained by the room. As soon as you go to creative virtual sessions, and the challenge is there's no constraint to the creativity you can have. What you need to be really careful as a leader and to get the best out of those sessions is actually it's well structured, or else it can go off in all kind of directions. But as Joe's kind of alluded to there, that there are free apps I use. For example, there's Miro. Well, Miro is not free, but there's Jamboard, which is free. There's, Zoom has breakout rooms. You can do breakouts. You can do virtual whiteboards using the technology. It's a case of working out what you want to achieve and then the best tool. But don't be afraid to have a go. If it doesn't work, just pick another one next time. I think people will appreciate trying something new. We've had some great feedback from clients and from attendees, participants to courses. Just on actually that tool was the best feedback was that tool was really good, and I'm using it now in my team meetings because I've never come across it before. So just play with the technology.
Thank you. I'm mindful of time, and we've got 3 questions left, so I want to go with the one with the most upvotes. What is the best way to get your ideas recognised if you are in a more junior position?
So this is challenging because, of course, if the environment isn't supporting you to include and share your ideas, you've got to find a way of getting them through. So I think it is just about taking that opportunity, making sure that you're sharing ideas in one-to-ones, in team meetings. As Mark said, if you're not feeling like you've got the space, perhaps pop an idea into chat and it might prompt that conversation. But I think it's about recognising those moments where you can make a difference. And to some extent, if the environment's not supporting it, creating an opportunity for yourself to do that. I don't know whether you add anything to that, Mark.
Yeah, the other thing I'd say is just because you throw your idea out there, don't expect the other person receiving it actually understands what you've just told them. So I think the challenge as a junior person is you think you put an idea there and the senior person is kind of blanked. And my tip and technique to do is communicate in a way which links in with what they're trying to achieve. So your idea should be really clear in how is this going to make that person's job easier, and it's much easier to be recognized then by the other person because they understand what's the value, what's in it for me. So when we talked about empathy before and empathizing, always think about that in terms of your communication, and it might be that you just need to orient your idea and how you articulate that in a different kind of way to get it recognized.
Thank you. There is another 2. One of them does have a few upvotes. As a leader, should you go with your own ideas and potentially bias the team, or wait for ideas from the team?
I think as a leader, the best thing to do is hold back on your own ideas and ask the team for theirs first, because as the person posting the question has alluded to, once you put your thinking out there, then there's a potential bias that could creep in, and people might kind of go with your idea because you are the leader. So keep it as open as possible, ask for ideas and thoughts, try and hold your own idea back, and then share it. And make sure that, you know, people's ideas are debated and discussed, and it's not just a kind of you know, it goes into a kind of a rabbit hole. You know, people hear back, or if they've been involved in the conversation, if they haven't been involved in the conversation, you feedback on those decision making as well.
Thank you, Jo. And I'm just going to squeeze this last one in here,
Yeah.
because I think it's really interesting. Do we always fear change? I quite like it and don't feel threatened.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think this is a personality element. I think it's also how used to change you are and how you've experienced it in the past. If it's been a positive change for you, we get very affected by, you know, our past experience. So it's personality and affected by experience. So I think the more we do, the more comfortable we get with it and the more open we are for it. Mark, were you going to say something as well?
Yeah. So embracing change is fantastic, and if you're the kind of person kind of bringing on changes opportunity, then it should be changes opportunity. The watch out is that other people are being impacted by it differently. So there's nothing worse in an organization. You got somebody bobbing around like Tigger about the change, and they're so fantastically enthused about it, but then everyone else is really fearful, and that can create some tension there. So just be conscious of the fact that just because you see it as an opportunity doesn't mean everybody sees an opportunity, and that can affect you as that if you're a leader of a team, then you kind of go, this is fantastic, and everyone's kind of not feeling the same love, and that can create some discord within the team. So yeah, we should embrace it, but we're human. We've got negativity bias. We have a scarf reaction. We react to things. So just be conscious of that, and you can help other people through the change, because your positivity should be a positive for the team as well.
Lovely, well answered. Thank you so much, Mark and Jo. So we are now drawing to a close. So hopefully everyone has found this webinar beneficial, and you do feel able to implement some of the behaviours that we've explored today. As I mentioned at the start of the webinar, for those of you who are joining us live, as this session closes, you will be asked to complete a quick evaluation form. The link is also available now in the chat. This will give you the opportunity to share your email address so that you can receive a copy of the slides. And if you have time, please do provide us with your feedback. All of our past webinars can be found on the NIHR TV YouTube channel under the Development and Support Webinars playlist. You can also find links in the chat box for the online leadership development resources and the NIHR Academy events. Thank you all for your time today, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.